So we recently did some spin to win action here on the channel, which was pretty damn goated, not gonna lie. But it had one massive issue. The damage was not enough for high pits. So I did what any reasonable man would do. I went to the German. And after a few hours of this, I finally managed to create what I believe is the best Whirlwind Dust Devil build out there. Capable of pushing tier 110 while still leaving room to potentially double or triple the damage output with some better gear. And that's without using the elixir of holy cringe. And better yet, I've created 3 builds, so anyone can play this magnificent piece. You'll find all of these versions in the planner. In this video, I will be focusing on the godliest of speedrunning builds, spamming through tier 90s in less than 2 minutes. Because let's face it, that shit is pretty goddamn fun. Okay, so how in the hell is this even possible? Isn't Whirlwind like the shittiest skill in the universe? Well, yes. So we're abusing the insane scaling of gushing wounds in this build. And with scaling, I mean scale it to the absolute moon. Because this shit is crazy. By stacking crit damage and bleeding enemies with the berserk ripping aspect, we're doing bleed damage that can tick for up to 100 million each. Since Whirlwind is absolutely atrocious, however, we also need to make use of Dust Devils to stack up the bleed damage. This is done via 3 aspects: Devilish Aspect, Dust Devil, and Fierce Winds. The main damage from these are from the Devilish Aspect, however, and by stacking a shit ton of resource generation. Now, on top of all these cool aspects, I also incorporated 2 items that are extremely slept on: Tibolt's Will and Yen's Blessing. Since I'm obviously the most famous YouTuber out there, the price of these items are obviously about to skyrocket after this video, but currently they're pretty much free. By combining these 2 items, we're able to keep Shouts and Unstoppable up permanently, granting us insane amounts of fury, generation, and survivability. Not only that, though, if you snatch a pair of Yen's Blessing with greater affix on the damage reduction, then you've basically gotten yourself 2 defensive aspects in just 1 affix due to it rolling so insanely high. So don't sleep on these boots, folks. Alright, and then we obviously have the skills. The only skill here that looks to be out of order from a typical Whirlwind build is Leap. So what the hell is going on there? Well, shit, my man, it's due to Leap being absolutely busted. Not only does it generate over 100 fury each time we use it, but it also grants us everything we ever wanted: damage reduction, berserking, and a shit ton of damage. Wait, what? Leap? Damage? How? Oh, you beautiful human. Just wait and I'll show you. Let's start by checking out the gear and aspects first that you need to play this build. Firstly, you see that I'm rocking 3 Ubers. This is mainly to show off, though, as 2 of them are kind of meh for this build, and that is Shaco and Starless Skies. By dropping these 2, you're losing a bit of damage but gain a bit of defensiveness. What you're really out for, however, is the Granddaddy. You can probably play this build without it, but you'll lose a shit ton of damage. So swipe that credit card and get to work. Alright, and for titty protection, you'll be looking for something like this. You need 1 armor roll along with a resistance roll here to not fucking die El Mao. And as aspect, the Bull Kathos aspect is massively important. We need to create earthquakes via our leap in this build, and this aspect sorts that shit out with ease. And then we have the gloves. Now, this is where things get spicy. You're looking for something like these ones, where the crowd control duration increases our challenging shout duration. What's spicy, however, is the tempered crit damage. To temper crit on your items, you'll need to make a rogue alt and find the tempering manuals on that character. You'll then transfer your items over and start tempering. A bit annoying, but definitely worth it. This is also where I'm using Fierce Winds, giving us big damn when our Dust Devils grow in size, along with being able to shoot tornadoes out of our dick. And then we have Tibolt's Will. This grants a permanent 20% damage along with massive fury whenever we gain Unstoppable. Ideally, you would get a pair with greater affix on the damage reduction, but I couldn't be asked LOL. We then have the Yen's Blessing. I absolutely love these for this build. I bought these from a King Paragaming enjoyer, and they're nasty as hell. With greater affix and hitting the masterwork, you can get 40% damage reduction from these, which is basically 2 aspects right there. And on top of that, every 8 seconds you get a free shout, which both turns you into a god and makes you fart out some additional tornadoes. Now we have the interesting stuff. Firstly is the Big Daddy Bonker. This is where we put the Berserk Ripping aspect to get maximum amount of bleed. You can also see that I'm rocking vulnerable damage instead of crit. And why is that? Well, shit, son. That's due to the Hemorrhage legendary node. By combining crit and vulnerable, you'll get the best from both worlds. 400 or 500 vuln is what you're looking for. I also have changed to cast Dust Devils twice here. You want to get this to 100 ideally, but that would require you to hit the masterwork 3 times. And yeah, that ain't happening. So why don't I put that shit on the dual wields then? Well, my man, then that would require you to hit masterworking 6 times. Instead, you're smacking on Dust Devil size here and try to cap it out at 100%. This is also where we have the Dust Devil Whirlwind aspect, along with Earthquake aspect to deal big damn whenever we stand in our earthquakes. And for last weapon, we obviously have the Granddaddy. Without this, you lose half of your crit damage, so it's pretty important that you get it. Onto the jewelry. The most important to get here is heavy-handed, as it's doing some crazy double-dipping shenanigans. Ideally, you would get this as a greater affix and masterwork it, but hey, save that for the crazy German Barb enjoyers. Imposing presence is, however, pretty much mandatory to stay alive, granting massive amounts of health. And obviously movement speed, because we want to be fast as fuck boy. If possible, swap out max life for counter-offensive or crit chance though, as it's pretty dog here. And for jewelry, we have the Starless Skies and this beautiful piece. If you don't have the Starless Skies, then grab the same as this one and imprint the Elements aspect or Bold Chieftain's aspect. Just make sure to grab chance to get vulnerable somewhere, because it's tough to keep up on bosses otherwise. Also, don't forget the Giant Strides aspect here, as it's massively important to lower the cooldown of leap. Well, shit, my son, great job, friends. Gear and aspects are now done. Let's take a peek into how you set up your weapon arsenal now. Pay close attention, though, because this may be extremely tough to follow. You're first going to take your leap and set it to slashing weapon. Then take Whirlwind and set it to slashing weapon. Yeah, it's not easy being a barbarian, a lot to keep track of. And what about the weapon expertise? We'll just set it to two-handed axe for some extra vulnerable damage. The two-handed sword is extremely goated though, and that's why we're using it on the weapons. Okay. And what do we have next? Well, it's time for you to fucking sub, obviously. And become a member, because Doggo needs a friend, and how the hell else am I supposed to pay for all the furry cosmetics? Alright, now it's time. Time for my insanely high IQ skill tree, that is. We start off with the mandatory wet fart on the basic skills and grab some core skills instead. Pressure Point helps us keep vulnerable up, and we pick up Enhanced Whirlwind for some Fury Regen. We then go to the defensive skills and pick up pretty much everything to not hecking dial Mao. Imposing Presence is what I wanted you to grab on your amulet. I'm also using Tactical Rallying Cry in this setup for massive Fury Regen. The Fortify is sorted via the Paragon board instead. We then go to the Brawling skills and pick up War Cry along with a bunch of passives for damage, movement speed, and damage reduction. This is also where we have Battle Fervor, which is our main source of berserking. We trigger this via using Leap, and we also have Power Leap, which generates massive amounts of fury. After that, we go to pick up Counteroffensive for some damage. You can also pick Pit Fighter here if you want to drop some damage reduction elsewhere. And then we have the ultimate skills. Invigorating Fury is our main source of healing in the speed-running variant. In the pit-pushing variant, however, we are also running some other sources of healing, but you'll find that in the planner. This is also where we have Heavy-Handed and obviously Wrath of the Berserker for massive damage. And finally, the key passive. It's the first section of this passive that is absolutely bonkers, stacking up bleeding to insanity, and is the reason we want to stack as much crit chance and crit damage as possible. While my gear is pretty decent from the view of a dad with 25 kids, there's still room to at least double its damage via this passive. So get to work and farm some gear. Well, damn, we even managed to clear the skill tree, huh? And now it's time for my awesome Paragon board, and you know it, baby. And this time around, I focused on making you as tanky as possible to make this build at least 10 beer viable, while at the same time grabbing all of the mandatory glyphs and legendary nodes. In the starting board, we have Wrath. Absolutely massive for granting us crit damage, but also for some fury regen on bosses. We then go to the Warbringer board, pick this legendary node to gain Fortify and Socket Marshal. Having it here helps slightly with the resistances. We also have a bunch of Fury on kill nodes along with max life here, which helps out a lot. To the left is where you find Hemorrhage, granting insane bleed damage. Pick this one last, however, as we're not using any rare nodes here. Instead, go to the Blood Rage board and try to get this one capped. I'm still missing 100 damage while berserking, but I can't really bother masterworking my gear again. Also, grab Exploit here for vulnerable damage and an easy way to obtain Vulnerable. After that, we go to the Decimator board and Socket Twister. The additive damage is alright since it has such high numbers, but what we're really after is the multiplicative bonus. And finally, the Boner Breaker board. Here we find Rumble, which grants 10% big dam per earthquake we generate. Typically, you have one up at a time when you're just gaming normally, and 2 or 3 out when you're busting on bosses with all of your shouts and keep resetting leap. Which is pretty neat. Alright friends, that's the Paragon. Now it's time to get hecking good and learn how to game. It's rather easy. Just hold down the spin to win button El Mao. But there are a few things that you can do to max out your damage. First being, leap whenever it is off cooldown. Just try to actually hit it, or else you're fucked. On bosses, you also need to make sure to stand within the earthquakes to reap its benefits. What's amazing, however, when it comes to the other skills, is that you want to be using them as frequently as possible. The only button that you could use sparingly is Challenging Shout, and save it for some elites. If you swap to the other setup, however, you know the pit-pushing one. Then you need to keep spamming the Whirlwind button rather than holding it down. This is due to us using the undying aspect in that setup, and we need it for healing. But when you're rocking this one and just farming, you may as well just hold it down to not get carpal tunnel syndrome, because that shit hurts, man. You also need to make sure that you're always using elixirs. My top ones are these: Antivenin, Precision, Holy Cringe, and Fortitude. You can always combine Antivenin with another elixir. Don't know how? Well, shit, son. Better watch the next video than El Mao.